Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. And I was thinking that when Norma Desmond, the fading movie star, says famously in Sunset Boulevard, "I am big, it's the pictures that got small," she's giving us an example of shrinkflation, about which the papers are so full these days. And incidentally, we'll be talking about the rather magnificent revival of Sunset Boulevard, the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical in London, in the new year. So do stick around for that. It's a remarkable production, and I got so much more out of it than I ever imagined I would. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're going to be talking about a show that I saw at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and which I loved. And it's also a show that's got an enormous potential, I think, both professionally and on the amateur circuit, because it can claim, I think, in a way, to be the British answer to Annie the musical, because the show itself is brilliant. And the production I saw of it at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe was also brilliant. And that's all the more amazing because it has a significant child cast. Now, it would be wrong of me to say that children in casts in musicals sometimes disappoint, but it is true that sometimes a child actor doesn't always have the breadth that you might expect of a more adult actor. But in this case, that wasn't true at all. The child cast of this show was phenomenal. So what is the name of this show? Well, in Edinburgh in 2023, the show was called A Girl MissRed. MISSRED. It's her name, because the central character, who is an orphan, is Fran Ethel Red, and she is the central character in this fabulous new show. Now, I believe the show in 2024 is being renamed MissRed, a family musical by Lorman, Finch, Coleman and Corey, because it's a show that's developed over a small number of years, and we'll be hearing more about that in the interview with Mel Lorman, the principal writer, later in the episode. We'll also be hearing 2 songs from the score. But what's it about? Well, the story is set in 1930s England, and Fran Ethel Red, an orphan child who's been fostered many times in Bristol, is about to go on a journey. Not on her imaginary ship with its crew of friends, which is the ideal that she fantasises about, but this time she is literally off to explore new horizons. It might seem like yet another foster placement, but this one is going to be different. It's in South Devon on the coast, and she'll get to see at last the sea, which has always been part of her dreams. But how long will she last there? The odds are not good. Although Fran loves the beautiful surroundings, she fears the people will be the same as before. Few, if any, have taken the time to discover what is beneath Fran's feisty, lively and inquiring persona. MissRed's arrival in the close-knit community causes dismay, curiosity, and will ultimately create divisions. Will this boisterous live wire only shock and outrage, or can she also spark new vitality and warmth in some of the troubled and unfulfilled populace? Join Fran on her voyage of discovery. Now, the British Theatre Guide gave the first iteration of this show, which went to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe originally in 2016, 5 stars and called it a surefire hit, not to be missed. And for my own view, when I saw it in 2023, I thought it was wonderful. I described it as having a flat-out brilliant children's cast and said, I have never seen acting from a children's cast of such quality in my life. Some real stars amongst that group. This is a show that has the potential to be the British Annie. And it's not just because there's some very obvious similarities. The central character is an orphan girl looking for a better life and finding trial and tribulation in the process of looking for that better life in the 1930s to boot. It's because the show is undoubtedly contextually very British. It's interesting narratively, musically fabulous, and it's one of those shows which I think could be picked up so easily and be an enormous success. So let's get down to business. What are we going to hear today? Well, in just a minute, we're going to hear a wonderful song from this score called Live Wires. And this was an amazing showstopper when I saw it on the stage, and it's got one of those melodies which can sometimes really hook into your memory and hang around for a very long time. But that's no bad thing at all. After that, we'll hear a short conversation with the principal book writer and lyricist of the show. That's Mel Lorman, who's written for the BBC, both on radio and television, and is also a drama and English teacher. And she runs BATS, B-A-T-S, youth drama company, based around Bath, and it's some of the BATS alumni who so impressed me in this Edinburgh production of MissRed. And then after that, we'll hear another song from the show, which is the Act 1 finale, called Danger. Now, a quick word on the recording. You might notice halfway through the conversation with Mel, there's a slight change in the ambience in the recording quality. There's a reason for that, and it's a very Edinburgh reason at that. I caught Mel immediately after a performance of a show, and her cast and crew were still hanging around in the building, so we had to find somewhere very local to where the performance had just been to record our interview. After quite a lot of searching in the building where that performance took place, we found a room and merrily started chatting away. So far, so good. But then halfway through, we were asked if we might leave because that part of the building was having to close. That's the kind of thing that happens in Edinburgh. It's all very much on the hoof. So Mel and I went off and looked for another venue, which was much harder in that same building in the parts that were still open. And we ended up in a small anteroom which led to another room itself. It was like a cupboard with no lights. And you'll hear a totally different atmosphere in the second half of that recording as the sound context is rather different, and you may occasionally hear a door opening or closing. However, that is the delight of Edinburgh, and it is real life. Well, that's quite enough about the soundscape of this episode. Let's get on with it. In just a minute, I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Mel Lorman about a girl MissRed, and let's take us into that with the wonderful song Live Wires.
A smile that's beaming when you want to outshine. Send a light that's gleaming, and if anger needs expressing, don't puff, try steaming. Do things to yourself, no, show us how you're feeling. Invigorating all that you do. Dare to be a live wire too.
I'm Mel Lawman, the producer with Dairy Productions, and we're putting on a musical, a fresh new musical, which is an hour and a quarter, called A Girl, MissRed.
Now, A Girl, MissRed is a show that I have literally just finished seeing, and I was desperate to come and find you at the end because it's incredibly accomplished.
Thank you.
It's really very remarkable for a number of reasons which we'll talk about as we go through it. But could you briefly, without giving away spoilers, talk about the narrative? You know, what's the story, and actually who you are as an organisation to bring it to? And then we'll talk about your involvement, which I know is incredibly central.
Okay, well, it's set in the 1930s. And the central character is a little girl who's very feisty and outspoken and has been sent from one foster care home to another. Her mother is unwell and unable to look after her. She's given up on people completely and has no dreams or aspirations to be in a family until she's offered what might be her final placement, and discovers it's not in Bristol, where she's spent a lot of her time. It's actually down in South Devon, and her dream has always been to see the real sea. So she tries a little bit harder, but it's not easy for her just to fit in, because she's what you might call odd. That's what the local kids call her. She's just different. She speaks her mind. She doesn't tell lies. And you might think a bit like put a teenager from nowadays back into the 1930s, and that's what you get when children should be seen and not heard. So that's the story, and she goes to stay with a grieving widow whose husband, cleverly, we don't ever meet him because he's passed away, but we get the idea that he was from Bristol and probably was from care himself, and suggested that his wife took on a foster kid for a short time, and he was hoping it would help with the grieving process. Whether it does, you have to see the show.
But his compassion is, if you like, thematically interconnected throughout.
Yes.
Actually, so we don't meet him. We certainly feel him, I think, actually. Now, I want to explore that story in a minute, but it's a musical. Let's start with, how did it start? How did A Girl, MissRed commence?
It started about 7 years ago, actually. There was a different,
and how old is
version.
Frances in the piece, would you say?
Frances, she's 10 or 11.
Yeah, just a bit older.
Yes,
I know you could say it has the same age as your central
character.
character.
We've had different casts,
Yes.
but the show has been in development, really, for about 7 years. We were due to put on a fuller version in Bath during the pandemic.
An oft-told story, this,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah, and we had a cast of 60, and in fact, some of the past cast were in the audience tonight because they're up here anyway. So
Is that Zenith, by any chance? The Zenith Youth Group, yes.
Yeah. So it was a bittersweet thing for them because they know all the songs and the words, but they've seen a realisation, because we worked on it for about 8 months, but cast were just getting COVID and they couldn't rehearse together. So it was an impossible thing, and a lot of money was spent on it, and it's taken me 2 years to kind of get over it, but to bring another version. To remount, to recast, to get more of the emphasis on the central characters and bring it to the story and the main songs.
So you have honed it over that time.
Yes.
So it's a 7-year gestation, which is quite interesting, with, if you like, a 5-year first stage and then a 2-year secondary stage. But it's your story. You wrote it, by which I mean you wrote it. So what made you want to write this?
Well, about 7 years ago, I was teaching in school. I'm a drama teacher. I have my own business now. And I thought I would like to write a new school musical that had very strong female characters, that was flexible, that you could increase the cast, make it smaller, bigger, leave in some characters, leave out some storylines. So I started on this complex thing of thinking, what do I want?
Structurally, how will you make that work? That's the first question, isn't it?
And in fact, there is going to be a larger version again back in Bath in March, so I can bring back some of the lovable characters that we missed. A comedic character will come back in and their family. So there are other storylines that can go on during the main story.
So presumably, just to make this plain, there is a kind of full 2-act version available.
There is.
And what we had here was the Edinburgh version, which is an hour and 15, I think.
Yes, that's right.
In a 1-act version, but absolutely coheres.
Yes.
But I imagine the 2-act version would allow some of the extra characters to breathe a little,
exactly.
or maybe a couple more episodes
like a certain character like Mr. Rathbone, who was mentioned a few times, would be there with his family, and they've got a couple of excellent songs. In fact, we made a recording of the whole show. This is something that came out of the pandemic. We managed to get to Real World Studios, which is just outside Bath, Peter Gabriel's studios, and we did a full cast recording. And although we had restrictions of how many could be in the recording studio and It had its challenges.
Yeah.
We have got that online. So on our website, www.missredthemusical.co.uk.
And this is Red, R-E-D, we should
R-E-D,
say. Yeah.
MissRed, yes. You can actually hear some of the music. I intend to get a couple of our songs from this one re-recorded because I really like the versions. I mean, we've tweaked it. Sometimes it's been a solo and then it becomes a duo. Some songs that were sung by 3 are now sung by 2. And anyway, the finished product here is what's evolved, trying to also make it feasible for people to go and change costumes because I knew we were having no set. I really wanted it to look attractive and go with the moods and the change of times and the seasons.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you know, it's an odd thing to be talking about the costume so quickly, but you know, it looks good as well as sounds good, and as a story, it's terribly engaging. I bought in very, very quickly with the story about Miss Frances,
Yeah.
and you know, and also there's some recognisable tropes, by which I mean, we're all aware of the concept, and we've all felt in our own lives moments where we are the fish out of water, or where we've found a new group which is already established. You know, that's the school and the school children. There's a lot of drama arises from those relationships, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent, and people.
I actually changed school when I was 13 years old and was on the receiving end of bullying.
Ah, I'm sorry.
So yes,
but you know socially how that works.
So
yeah.
I'm very, very aware. Bullying can happen for so many different reasons, but actually being new somewhere, you are the focus of attention. You can get bullied for all manner of things, and so
usually
I love.
As a threat, isn't it? Quite
yes,
often,
and I love the idea of exploring that and prejudice, and you know we've got the Italian lad who is half Italian. So setting that in the 1930s with the prejudice that was going on about, just very subtly, just little things like that.
Well, I actually like the 1930s setting terribly, because also you make good use of it, you know, without revealing who the character might be. A real character from history sort of flits into the story in a rather wonderful way. Then we get a fabulous song, by the way, which is, I'm going to call it A Charleston, because that is the beat, and some Charleston or Charleston-style dancing was done. And that was a showstopper, essentially, isn't it? And
can you imagine that with a really large cast?
If that was on at the Palladium, yes. Oh, well, so that's the thing that they would pick out and put on the television.
Yeah, there's a longer one version of it musically as well, because it's beautiful. And all we recorded with a live band, so although we had to use backing tracks here, that is a live 7-piece band that was recorded at the Forum in Bath.
Well, as you've been saying, the whole thing about productions, if other people want to take it up, is the flexibility. It can fit a different size, it can be done in different ways.
Yes.
You know, surely almost every group will be in a position to fit this into their
so.
slots. Because
and quite often it can be male or female. Yeah. We had a Mr. Bracken, a wonderful performer today, but there's no reason why Mr. Bracken, head teacher, could be a headmistress.
Absolutely.
So things can be tweaked like that.
But taking us back to the genesis and the writing, so you're the writer and I think the lyricist.
Yes.
So did you always envisage it as a musical?
Yes. In fact, I met the composer was actually in the audience tonight. He came up. He's one of the composers. There are 3, but in this version, most of the songs are his, and they were definitely all. The others were reorchestrated, so it has a feeling of.
It's integrated in sound.
It's integrated, and I think the lyrics keep it all together anyway. Sorry, what was the question?
Well, you always envisaged it as a musical.
Yes.
So yes, but you're a lyricist rather than it's how do you get the composer on board?
A few years ago, I said to composer Matt Finch in Bath, I said, I quite fancy writing a musical, but I've never met somebody to work with on it. Can I send you a song? Well, 3 days later we had Dare I. That was the first song we wrote.
Oh, right, and that's the I Want song almost, isn't it? Yes, it's very. I mean, it comes very early on, and it's used periodically as well, rather nicely. You know, it's as I say, it's terribly professional. This, and I don't mean meaning to suggest that you're not professional, but what I love about the fact, it just feels top notch. And you know, the one song will feed into another, and you've got echoes of songs and reprises, showstoppers, you know, things you could cut out if you wanted to, but add to the flavour and the niceness of it, and things which are absolutely plot specific and need to happen and express an emotion, take the plot forward. You know, it's got all the tropes I would expect of a musical.
Yes.
I guess you must love musicals.
Absolutely love
I was going to say,
because
and have you learned how to do this by osmosis? Or?
It's osmosis, really. My first degree a long time ago was actually dance and art, but
which is a good step isn't it?
In the summers, I did drama summer schools up in London, and it was always like the musical theatre bug. Not that I wanted to perform in them, but it was just watching them. I
understand
absolutely
this.
adore them. So musicals, incredibly keen, and I'd always written poetry. And so I'd written plays. I used to work for the BBC and Radio Wales and things like that, and I've done for television as well.
So you're a professional writer?
Professional writer, yeah. But I mean, I don't do too much. I'm also, with my drama studio, and I nurture young
Well, there's only
children.
so many hours in the day, aren't there?
Exactly, and I'm getting a bit old, and I try
Shush.
and cut back on some things, but I still love working with the young people. I mean, I think that's, and you get honest feedback from young people.
Oh, yes, and why? This doesn't make sense. And yes, exactly. Can I ask, well, rather it's not so much ask, but I don't know how you got your present cast, but I'm going to say something which is often overlooked. The diction was brilliant. I could hear every word, and I was sitting towards the back. Every word in every lyric, every word in every delivery of prose. I didn't miss a thing. And I have seen some shows here in Edinburgh, I'm not going to name them, where sometimes a young cast can be eager, but they aren't necessarily able to enunciate. I wouldn't say it's Victoria. It's not Sir Donald Wolfett. It's not necessarily declaiming to the back row.
Yeah.
Lovely echo in here.
The children were still modern, even though we stressed in those days you could be very eloquent, and we didn't contract things. So they've had some
elocution training.
Not really, because they're all good,
they know what they're doing.
High quality students in the first place. But that is so important to me, and also the vocal coach who isn't here today, Amanda Hickmore. She's very, very strict on hearing, especially the beginnings of sentences. So there's been a lot of work.
You can't jump on when it started. So
no.
I can absolutely confirm to you that the story coheres narratively, but it is through the good diction, the excellent diction, in spoken and sung words that got it across so well. But your cast is astounding as well. I mean, your central actor in the role of Little Miss Red is surely destined for greater things.
Yes, Sasha. Well, I think they all are. I
was going to get on to the rest of the cast, because some of them melted my heart, some of them impressed me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to have 7 children.
I also have a heart that doesn't melt very often, so that was well done there.
No, I wanted 7 children, and I wanted them all to have quite strong characters, and I think that comes across very well. 2 of the children actually there are up for Bath Young Actor of the Year, and they only select 3 junior.
So you've got 2 of the 3 out of them?
Yeah, I've got 2. So we've got Sasha, who's the lead girl, and also Catherine, who played Hattie.
Oh,
yeah,
she's the bright one, isn't she?
She's the bright one, yes, who knows everything. Yeah. So that's the calibre, but they're all, they do the festivals down in Bath. They're accomplished at doing musical theatre, but doing Shakespeare, doing verse. And I love verse, so I get all my students to do poetry, but fun poetry, sort of that they understand and they can enjoy the words and the power of words.
Well, if you can connect poetry early on, then it will stay with you. If you can't, as so many of us were let down in some way by various... poetry is... I've acquired the taste as I've got older, but it took me a while and a wish to do so. Really? So I'm really pleased to hear that. Yeah. But yes, the cast is uniformly good, not a duff note in it, not a duff performance. But clearly some performers with skills and empathy and, I would say, let's go back to skills, talents seemingly above their years.
Yes.
And that isn't always true with a child cast or a youth cast. I have to be honest. This was an outstanding cast, possibly the best I've seen. I'm just going to have to say, I don't know the name of the actor, but the one who played Arturo is...
Frederick.
Yes, but he has such an ability to... I mean, he's the one who melted my heart. And I sat there thinking, why? How am I falling like this? Yeah. But he just knows how to...
He was believable in that.
He was, but also he doesn't overstage. He's got a really important part, but he knows how to... He's a reactive character, essentially, and he restrained that. No one stole focus.
And he's relatively new to
Is
drama,
he?
actually. Yeah, I started working with him in March. Yeah. Threw him into the festival, and actually he won the solo, but he was so shocked, he was so nervous to be doing it. So he's getting his confidence, and to be honest, he's the least experienced of the group.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't say anyone looks unexperienced, but I wouldn't have clocked that necessarily. No. But as I say, that is to praise the people I'm praising is not to not praise the others. Every single one of them is solid gold. Yes. Genuinely, and they felt like a group of school children in the context of the school as well, which is nice. So you got your composers,
yes.
But getting composers and then writing. So do you have experience of? You obviously know how to write a lyric,
yes.
And you were saying that things came back very quickly, but song placement is quite an interesting thing, isn't it? And there's a lot of songs in this, actually. You know, and they do all the things we've said. It's not one note. It's got a beautiful breadth to it emotionally as well. And it could be terribly earnest, and it really isn't. It's important and it's sincere, but it's not. It doesn't drag.
No, it doesn't drag, and I get
hang.
bored very easily. So I'm the best person to be writing the story in that respect and placing the songs, because I do get quite impatient. And sometimes when the message has come across in the song, why are you doing it to death? Unless there's some spectacular dancing going on, that would distract me.
Yeah, you can come back to a reprise or something. I've seen many a song where they've got one good verse repeated ad nauseam. Yes, no, quite. Not. And where a lyric is repeated here or there, it is normally as a closing thing in this or something like that. It's earned its return, but it's not there for the sake of filling the gap. Good. What were the paths not taken? Do you mind me asking? Can you know, because the narrative it connects terribly nicely. You know. But were there versions that you would have taken?
Well, in the fuller version, we expand some of the actual families that we get to know. In this occasion, Mrs. Rathbone had her 2 daughters, but we hear about the father being in the background putting on pressure, but we actually see that the story plays out rather than it being sort of hinted at. So he's an interesting character that wasn't here. We also had another family called the Blewett family, Mr. and Mrs. Blewett, who had lots of children, and that's actually really quite comedic, and it's sad to have missed a couple of their songs. He helped in the finding of Fran in the storm, so he became a little bit of a hero rather than the local drunk who had too many children.
A redemptive journey.
Yes. So actually at the opening of the school, he is presented with a trophy for being a hero, and of course all his children who sort of got a bit fed up with Dad now think he's wonderful. So she has more of an impact, Frances Ethelred has more of an impact than just her relationship with Martha. It's on the other characters, and she actually points out to Mr. Rathbone that he doesn't take any notice of his family. And it's sort of, he thinks cheeky, whatever, but she just speaks her mind all the time.
Well,
she sees that. She sees. She just totally sees and gets it.
But also she has empathy for others, even though her own plight has been unfortunate. And it is that empathy that she's able to sort of fire off in different directions, which is misunderstood, isn't it, ultimately?
It is, yes.
You know, honesty is a remarkable thing.
But not everybody wants to hear the truth, do they?
Not the unalloyed truth, I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, because one of my favourite, I think, of Fran Ethelred, her song, I Won't Say Sorry, because I don't feel sorry. And I love that song. I think it's so different because so many times we say sorry and we don't mean it. It's very false. Yeah, and it's I'm sorry, but. Yeah. So that's not our Fran.
And when she does say sorry later on, she's actually saying sorry to Mrs. Timms, who's her mother's character.
She's caused trouble for her. Yeah. She does feel sorry about that.
Yeah, exactly. You can see that. That's also a nice character point. It really plays it up. Also, very nice wordplay, if I may say. You know, the finale song, the triumphant song at the end, is "odd gets even," which actually just a neat phrase, but of course ties in very much with this. I mean, get even. It's not about getting even, but it's about levelling the playing field. That kind of evenness.
Yeah, it's not
getting anyone down.
No, and even the people who want very nice to her, she doesn't want revenge of any sort. She just wants it to stop and be peaceful. And things like how do we perceive odd, and it can be unusual and special and different. And I could have pushed that further, but setting it in the 1930s, I think it brings up all things that we can talk about if we want to.
Well, once again, it is a lovely parallel with, well, not a lovely parallel, it offers a parallel with what's going on in relation to diversity and non-acceptance and acceptance, for as much or as little as you, the punter, wants it.
Exactly, yes.
No, but that's good writing.
Yeah, and what's interesting in our cast, we've got a girl who's half Ukrainian. So her mother's here and her parents had to leave Ukraine. We've got 2 of the cast are half Chilean. Arturo is half Italian. So it's quite interesting that you know they've got experiences of feeling a bit different or whatever, or knowing about being special and different. Yes.
It's once again, it's that beautiful extra flavour, isn't it?
Yes. And also, what's quite funny when you look at the programme, and you can see this online. It seems like we've got a lot of Baxters, but they're not actually related.
Oh, really?
So we have the two girls who play sisters, and they are sisters in real life. And I think you can see a wonderful relationship between them. Although they get on brilliantly, and in here there was a little bit of difference. But we've also got other Baxters, and they're not related at all.
That's quite...
It's quite amusing. Yeah, it looks like it's a family show, and you've got a few Lawmans involved, and you've got a few Cannings involved. Yeah.
So what next for the show, or, both for you and for other people who want it?
For other people who want it, it's going to be available. We're putting on a fuller version in March at Prior Park College School. Actually asked to do it, and I'm going to be directing, and I'm absolutely chuffed about it with a cast of 25. So we'll get it back into the shape that it's ready for a minimum 25, and they have decent characters, because you don't want to involve children in things that they don't feel they're getting an option in. And that will be with older children and younger children playing the cast of adults and kids. But then it should be available for schools, and that was always the intention. It's just that it got a bit of hype when we first started, and we won masterclasses with Claude Michel Schomburg, and we had a song reach the finals of the Stars and Drew Best Song from a new musical.
These are names to be conjured.
They are, and so you start to think, oh, well, maybe it could end up in the West End. And of course, I can envisage it there. I mean, I'm a bit sick of Annie and Oliver, and I'm not saying they're not good, but it would be nice to have something British and fresh
and new.
But it's quite difficult to take on the likes of the big people. But I'm going to keep trying. So.
Well, you've got to get the product in, and I think you've got the product.
Thank you.
So I think that's fine. So how can people find you? What's your website? If
you look on www.missredthemusical.co.uk, go onto that. Don't be confused that they're a bit of a Freckles website. That's what it was originally called, but it's now MissRed is the full version, and this version is A Girl MissRed, which is only 1 hour 15. But 1 hour 15 is actually a really lovely time to put on a show in schools. But you can have the 2 hour with a good interval just by adding a few more characters and bringing in some fantastic songs that we've left out, including The Inn with No Way Out, where Tom Crocker, the ghost, appears. It's the most beautiful, haunting song, but we couldn't include that at the time to get the story across.
What a pity, but what an appetizer as well.
Yeah. Well, that will be, you can hear it on the website, and I'm sure you'll agree there are a few songs that weren't in this one that I'm really hoping and looking forward to bringing back.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for writing the piece and then bringing it here to Edinburgh. But I wish you great success, because this feels like something that's got legs. It really does.
Oh, that's so good to hear.
It feels very... it is. It doesn't just feel. It is very professional. It has so many qualities. It was beautifully performed on this occasion. It will be beautifully performed again, I'm sure, in Bath again in the new year and onwards. But actually, I would encourage anyone to have a look at the website and see if it's them, because actually this feels to me like it going to amateur dramatics groups and community groups as well as schools.
As well as some beautiful choral music. There's all sorts of music in there, and it can be simplified. I mean, we've got lots of harmonies going on there, but the composer has done various versions, and we tweak things if certain singers can't quite reach things. It's not about exposing weakness, it's about actually letting people shine, and I think they all do. I love the cast. I'm so proud of them.
Well, once again, thank you very much. A real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. And you.
I look forward to seeing what you bring in the future to Edinburgh, perhaps.
Oh yeah, I'm working on my second musical with Clement Ishmael, who's the worldwide musical director of The Lion King. We got through a rough draft of it during the pandemic, so that was a positive to come out. So hopefully it's going to start up in London workshopping. So slightly different and a very different show, completely wacky, based on 2 of my radio plays from years ago.
Are you at liberty to say what it's called yet?
It's called Couch. Couch, as in a couch you sit on, lie on, or whatever. Come and find out. And interestingly enough, Danny John Jules, who was the Red Dwarf, and
he's Cat in Red Dwarf.
He's Cat in Red Dwarf. He was in my first radio play of that, and I wrote to him, and I saw him on Strictly Come Dancing, and said, "Oh, do you remember blah blah blah?" He sent me a photo of the script front cover.
So yes,
and I said, "Do you know any really good composers?" And he put me in touch with Clem, and Clem and I have become such friends, and it is To me, this new show, it's about a teenager with anxiety issues, a lot of humour. It's very, very wacky.
Very now as well.
Very, very different. It's all about going into a completely new world. So I'll just plug that now.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're whetting my appetite terribly.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll let you know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I look forward both to hearing more about...
A Girl MissRed.
MissRed,
yeah.
A Girl MissRed and Couch.
Yes.
Good luck for the future.
Thank you very much.
She's brought danger, discord and pain. She's a nuisance who can't refrain from doing wrong. She's a danger, danger, danger.
The trouble with Fran is she's all but brave. She knows the rules and she can't behave. She's fun and exciting, she's reckless too.
As bright as a button, her talent shines through.
Can she think about tomorrow in a home where she'll stay? Dare we say that she is learning? She tries each passing day. The trouble with Fran is she's bold and wild, a hopeless case, an irksome child.
She's a live wire who shocks grown-ups.
What do I say about dogs and pups?
The trouble with Fran is she's all but brave. She knows the rules and she can't behave. She's hot and exciting, she's restless too.
Really what's wrong? She can't belong.
She's more danger Fran and she's hot but brave. She knows the rules and she can't behave. She's hot and exciting, she's reckless too.
She's a danger, danger, danger.
The trouble with
Willful
Fran
and
is she's
thankless,
brave.
it's
She
time
knows
to
the
face
rules
the
and she
fact.
can't behave. She's hot and
Misfits,
exciting, she's
delinquents,
reckless too.
can't help the way they act. The trouble with Fran must have reached an end. She's had her chances, she's not our friend. Enough is enough, excuse the thing. No point in protesting, you know who'll win. The journey's just begun.
It isn't clear, but she can't stay here.
And there we are, the Act 1 finale from A Girl MissRed, now called MissRed for 2024. And my thanks go to Mel for allowing me to talk to her immediately after a performance. As you know from other episodes of Musical Talk, when a show finishes, you have to strike the set and get everybody out, usually in 5 minutes. Now, she'd been able to do that, but of course, being so generous and giving time to me, she had her cast and crew hanging around the building waiting for her. So I'm incredibly grateful to her for giving me time to talk about this show, and I'm really glad she did. And I'm grateful to her cast and crew for being kind enough to hang around to allow that to happen. Now, I said at the beginning of this episode that I thought MissRed was a fabulous show, and as you heard from Mel, it is a show that can be picked up by anyone. This could go professionally to the West End or any other theatre, or it could be picked up equally well by a community group or an amateur group. If you'd like to get a feel of what the show's like, you can hear the songs, because they're all available on the website, and I'm delighted to say that there's expected to be a production in 2024 in the Bath area. That's likely to be around March at the Prior Park College, so do keep your eyes open for that. And a very good place to go to find out more about MissRed, the family musical, is their website. It's currently to be found on the website using the original name of the show, which was Freckles the Musical. So if you go to www.frecklesthemusical.co.uk, you can find out a lot more about MissRed. But should that change in the future, if you're listening to this episode sometime after its date of broadcast, just look for MissRed by Lorman, Finch, Coleman and Corey. It's a wealth of information, photographs, sounds and contact details for Mel about this fabulous show. And that, I think, brings this episode to an end. I do hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's whetted your appetite. If MissRed comes to a place anywhere near you, it's well worth catching. As I've said before, it's a show that feels like it's got enormous potential. It would delight me if it fulfilled it. Well, it's very nearly time for me to go, but I would just say we're reaching the end of 2023. So do tune in again to Musical Talk in the future, because very shortly we'll be having our annual quiz. Just a bit of fun. But for the time being, I think it's time to let you go off and prepare for the end of the year. There's so much to do. And I'm going to do that by saying the usual word. You know what it is. I do too. Why don't you join me in saying it? Although, if you are in a public space, you might want to say it sotto voce. Let's do it now. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk, edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright 2023. Except for the music, where the copyright remains with the original creators. And my enormous gratitude goes to them for allowing me to play their songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Musical Talk Thos.
Strange press, but I've been having an interview and it's really nearly finished, and it's really.
We've just been kicked out of the room, so we wondered if we could.
Would you mind if we just finished it off in this cubby hole here?
Oh, okay.
Do you know?
We haven't. Yeah.
Let us know when you're done and
Yeah.
we'll be in here.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Is there a light out here?
Doesn't look like there is necessarily. So, well,
We can do it in the dark.
thank you. I'm happy. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
All right.
no,
There's a
I'm
little.
happy.
Thank you. Sorry to disturb. We'll only be about 10 more minutes, I'd have thought. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about this. It's
That's all right. And it's interesting.
all part
isn't
of the Edinburgh experience, isn't it?
You can say to your listeners, we are now in a broom cupboard.
It has happened to me before, I must
As
say.
a-
Yeah, I was in summer hall interviewing, and right, I got to the last sentence where we were just about to say thank you, and we were kicked out by a rather stern person who wasn't listening at all, wasn't prepared to even let us finish with 30 seconds. So we had to go into the corridor. I mean, it was essentially, we walked around the corridor and went, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was simple as that. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. That looks terrible, doesn't it? We've just come out of the dark room.
Interviewing.
I was
It was a real thing.
It was real.
And it's not just because Fran, or we might call her little orphan Franny here. Now, a girl MissRed, I'm going to come straight in and say that I've literally just walked out of it in the last few minutes because we're recording this immediately after a performance. And by walk out, I mean the show finished. I'm going to say that again, actually. It didn't give the wrong impression. That gave the wrong impression entirely.